Okay everyone, today we are doing what if Deku had an NG quirk. This is going straight off the top of my head, but I do have an idea. Thanks for watching, and let's get into it. Okay, in this version, Izuku Hado is born. He's going to be Nejire's younger brother. He is born at like 2 or 3 years. He was born like 2 or 3 years after her. Deku is born with blonde hair in this version. So kind of like Yuji, he has been blonde on top, black to the sides. And he does still grow up in the same area. Don't ask me how that works. It's to say Nejire grew up, but he was like 2-3 grades ahead of Izuku and Bakugo. Now, Deku's a very cheery kid. He's not like Nejire, Kids gravitate towards him. He's very fun. He doesn't have the exact same problem as Nejire, where he keeps asking people about their quirks. So he's a lot more popular growing up. Him and Bakugo are very quick friends. Bakugo kind of being like his grumpy side, being like, "Why are you always so happy?" And Deku's like, "Oh, what's not to be happy about?" Deku and Bakugo would grow up together, and Bakugo's quirk would awaken. And one day Bakugo's quirk would awaken. Deku and Bakugo would be playing in the sandpit. When Bakugo would be like, "This is so boring." He'd slap his hands on the sand before making an explosion, causing some sand beneath him to turn into glass. Deku would be like, "Whoa, that's so cool," he'd say, trying to do the same thing. As Deku would slap his hand on the ground, a golden burst of energy would come up when he'd slap his hand in the sand. Causing the sand beneath his hand to also turn to glass. Deku and Bakugo would be looking at each other, being like, "Did we both just awaken our quirks?" They'd go to a teacher. Teacher. Deku and Bakugo would be speaking over each other. He awakened his quirk. He turned sand to glass. He'd be talking to the teacher, being like, "I didn't turn sand to glass. You turned sand to glass." They'd be bickering, and the teacher would be like, "Is there a chance you both did it?" The teacher would say, tired of Deku and Bakugo's usual shenanigans. He'd call both their parents. Inko would drive up and haul away Izuku as Bakugo would be driven away. By his mom. They'd both go to the same quirk doctor. Inko and Nitsuki thinking one of them had a copy quirk due to similar circumstances of their quirk awakenings. But Dr. Latrell would be like, No, they both have very different quirks. Izuku's quirk, is rather peculiar. He can absorb and release energy much like his older sister. But he can also absorb it. You say, pointing to a small bump on Deku's head. His parents thinking that Deku just had a sort of lumpy head since he was just a little kid. But no, it was a horn. It would grow every time Deku would absorb energy into himself. And he just explained to Bakugo's parents how Bakugo's he has explosions while Deku has energy blocks, Deku's energy blocks are like Nejire's to begin with, they curl out of him, but that won't save the entire what if watch. Just listen, okay, I have a very good idea about where this is going. Deku and Bakugo for the next 10 years will be like the dynamic duo, Deku's like the himbo in every Disney movie. In every Disney high school movie, he's like the lovable idiot kid. The kids going around him love him. Bakugo's like his best friend. It's like Troy Bolton, the one black kid in High School Musical. I haven't watched that movie in a minute. But still, Deku and Bakugo for the next 10 years would be enjoying themselves training on the side. Now, Deku's quirk does have some drawbacks you'd figure out as he's training. He can't absorb too much energy without forcibly discharging. And if he doesn't absorb enough energy, he starts running through his own reserves of energy. And if he does too much of that, he can pass out and risk dying. And risk dying or getting the shit beaten out of him, as he'd learned several chances with Bakugo. But Deku would figure some things out. He can only shoot energy out of his hands and feet, much like an Nejire. He'd figure out his output levels. He'd figure out more about his energy absorption. Figuring out he can absorb like quirk-based attacks as well, like Bakugo's explosions. Like, he wouldn't be able to absorb like the wind from a Detroit Smash, because the wind was always there, almost just pushing it forward. But he'd be able to absorb like All For One's air cannon, because All For One's just making and shooting the air cannon, basically. If that makes sense. It'll make more sense as we go along, but still. Anyway, Deku and Bakugo would be there in the last day of school. Deku will be chilling, being the life of the party as usual, talking to everyone, having a very good time. As the teacher would walk into class, being like, "Everyone, quiet down. Hop off Midoriya. Pause. Hop up Hardo. Pause." The teacher would start handing around career aptitude tests. Now, sign your name on these career aptitude tests and explain what your. He'd start laughing. He started laughing as he'd be handing out the career aptitude test before snatching them off the desk. "I'm just messing with you. I know you all want to be heroes." Deku and Bakugo would be in the group of. Deku and Bakugo would watch as everyone around them would start flaring off his quirks. Deku being so excited that small golden sparkles would glitter around him. Like, that's a habit Deku has. Like, energy glitters around him when he's excited. Bakugo would be like. And go in his usual rant as in canon, being like, "Shut up, you damn extras. Me and Sparkles are the only one who have any chance of making it to UA. You would be lucky to be psychics and busted dealer stuff." Deku would cover back at that. He didn't mean it, guys. Go on. And Deku would be like, "Shut up. Gonna get beaten up again," Deku would say. And Bakugo would be like, "Fine." After school, Bakugo would be like, "Yo, Hardo, wanna go to the arcade with me and these extras?" Deku would be like, "Oh yeah, that sounds like fun." And him and Bakugo, he'd be like, "Race you there," he'd say as he'd start flying to the arcade. Bakugo would be like, "You damn bastard!" He'd jump up, exploding stuff upwards. Deku wouldn't get caught in the sludge filling incident this time, as he'd go to the arcade with Bakugo instead. They'd fly to the arcade and Deku would, lose all his money gambling, because he's an idiot, man. Anyway, for the 10 months of training, Deku and Bakugo would be going crazy, For most of the training is mostly sparring and physical, and working on their physical bodies, because since Deku has a limited supply of energy, he can't rely getting everywhere by flying. And Bakugo is mostly so he can support bigger and bigger explosions. I'd say Bakugo's around season 2 level, I can't say where Deku is because there's no tangible comparison, because I can't say he's Nejire level yet, because that's kind of overpowered. But still, Deku can do things Nejire can't do, but Nejire has more raw output than Deku. Deku's blast still swell, but Deku develops a new move. He develops Shooting Star, where he makes the energy swell into a ball around his finger as he'd shoot it out, kind of like a spirit gun. Like, he'd go Shooting Star, bang. He developed Twinkle Star, where he swipes his hand through the air, and making several of those ball-shaped swells, and they drill into whatever's in front of him. He just swipe his hand through the air, and he developed another move. I can't remember the exact name I was thinking of. I was just in the shower thinking of this, but where he'd generate the energy from his feet, swirling around his whole body to shoot directly up into something. Anyway, Deku and Bakugo would be going to the UA entrance exam after the 10 months of training. They'll be looking a bit bigger, longer hair, more prepared for the entrance exam. Deku would stop Uraraka falling because he's just that nice of a guy before he'd go into the entrance exam. Now, Deku during the theory portion does get high. Deku's not book smart, but Deku's not book stupid, because Nejire is implied to be very smart in the actual canon, so Deku's kind of like that, where he's just kind of a ditz or a himbo, whatever you want to say. But still, Deku gets high in the theory portion, and during the practical portion of the exam, he does get called out by Ida, but it's not for muttering, more as it's for him being more than for him just chatting a lot. And Deku would be trying to talk to the people around him, be like, "Ooh, what's your quirk? What can you do? Ooh, you look fun." But Edo would be like, Can you stop that blonde from muttering so much?" He'd say, pointing towards President Mike, as President Mike would be like, "Both of you shut up," as he'd explain the 0-pointer to them, saying that it was just an obstacle. Now, Deku would go to his practical site, which is in a different spot from Bakugo as in canon, because they still go to the same school. Deku would still be with Ida and Ochako. He'd be stretching, he'd be in a nice little, one of them varsity jackets. He'd have a white shirt underneath, some jeans or joggers, and some nice little Jordans. He'd be ready to fly into the exam. President Mike would be like, "Go, go, go!" Deku would immediately start shooting energy from his feet. Not enough to fully break him as the ground as to conserve energy, but enough so he can slide around very easily. Deku would be sliding around, shooting balls of energy. Shooting star. Shooting star. Blasting through 1, 2, and 3 pointers. Deku doesn't care. He sees the robot. He destroys it. He doesn't think much about it. While doing this, he's inadvertently saving people without thinking too much about it. He's inadvertently saving people without thinking too much about it. He'd get to a 3-pointer. He'd look at it and shoot a shooting star at it. The shooting star would hit, but it would only dent, not breaking through the armor. Then he would smile. Twinkle star. He'd swipe his hand through the air, making several balls of energy that would shoot at the 3-pointer. Sorry, I don't know why I can't speak so good. But still, he'd make several balls of energy that would shoot at that 3-pointer, penetrating it. Pause. Deku would be doing this to all the robots, making sure to conserve a good bit of energy. He'd be absorbing some energy from them to keep his horn at a stable amount. And before he'd see something, a 0-pointer, he'd be about to ignore it, being like, "Scary," being like, "Eep," about to slide away before he'd see Uraraka about to get crushed by it. Or her ankle already under some rubble. Deku seeing this would move without thinking. He'd blast towards the 0-pointer, and lifting Uraraka up from it. He'd fly to a building. "It's calm. I've got this," he'd say while nicely setting her on the roof of a building. He'd fly down to the bottom of the 0-pointer, right where his feet were. He'd gather energy swirling it all around him as he'd yell, "Super Star!" He'd add the energy circle around him, drilling straight up and through the 0-pointer. Destroying its head from the bottom, leaving a hole directly going up from the 0-pointer from its crotch to its head as it would fall over backwards. Deku would pass out exhausted, having wasted so much energy. The teachers in the exam, like watching the site, would be shocked from this, being like, "Wow, this kid's amazing," especially All Might, seeing how selfless and prepared Deku was. Deku would wake up in Recovery Girl's office being like, "Oh." His quirk didn't work well with Recovery Girls. Since he ran out of energy, and Recovery Girl needs energy to heal. His horn would be extremely stubby. He'd be like, trying to poke himself with his horn, being like, "Oh, nubby." He'd wake up and lift his head, seeing Recovery Girl talking to a very skeletal man. That could be like, "Recovery Girl? For youthful heroine?" She'd be like, "Ooh, you flatter me, young man." And the Recovery Girl had to have known she was gonna be old at some point. Like, she's gonna look that old. Calling herself youthful is kind of a weird bit. Anyway, Deku would see the skeletal man that Recovery Girl was talking and be like, "Who's that? Is he a teacher?" The skeletal man would buff up, turning into his true form. Ha ha! I am here, young Midoriya, to tell you have passed. Deku would be like, "Oh my! Where did skinny guy go? How are you?" Deku would be looking so confused, being like, having the usual anime thing with like the eyes are like two little dots, and Deku would be like, "Huh? How's All Might here?" All Might would be like, "Ha ha ha," explaining his injury to Deku, being like 5 years ago, I was injured by a powerful villain. Also explaining the secrets of One For All to Deku, explaining how his quirk is unnatural and how he wants Deku to be his successor after seeing how selfless he was during the entrance exam. Deku would be like, "Oh my, I can't even begin to..." Before Deku could finish, All Might would pluck a hair out. Before Deku could finish expressing his gratitude, All Might would pluck a hair out. "If you want to take my quirk, eat this." Deku would be looking at All Might with a blank stare, being like, That's nasty as hell." All Might would be like, "You have to ingest some of my DNA." Deku would be like, "I'm not eating your hair." All Might would be like, "Just eat the hair, you child." Before Deku could protest again, All Might would stick the hair in his mouth, forcing Deku to swallow. Pause. Deku after swallowing the hair would be like, gagging a bit before he'd be like, I don't feel any different." All Might would be like, "Well, it should take around 30 minutes to digest, how food goes through your digestive system." Deku would be like, "Yes, All Might, I passed middle school." Anyway, Deku would go back home. The next day he'd wake up feeling invigorated. Golden lightning flowing around him already. Now, Deku can't figure out full cowling immediately, since he's more used to throwing energy through his hands and legs. But Deku is more built already using instinctively knowing how to figure out the percentage system of One For All, though. He can't figure out full cowling, but he can figure out the percentage system. He'd call All Might and Recovery Girl, and they'd meet him at Dagoma Beach. Well, he'd call All Might, and All Might would bring Recovery Girl. They'd meet at Dagoma Beach. Deku on his first usage would try using 100%. Without thinking too much. He'd break his arm, and as All Might would catch him after his jump. Recovery Girl would quickly kiss and heal Deku, who would absorb a battery to get his energy back up afterwards. Who'd absorb a battery or a car battery to get his energy back up afterwards. Recovery Girl would heal Deku, being like, you can't just break your arm straight away." Deku, after seeing this, would think, So I have to gauge it. He'd think about how he gauges his energy using just the right amount of energy he uses to destroy something. Anything. He'd be like 15%. Smash! He'd throw a punch, still blowing some air pressure, because All Might said you need at least 10% to blow air pressure. 10 or 50, I can't remember. Anyway, Deku would still blow the air pressure from his punch, but not enough to break his hand, He barely even sprained himself. Deku would barely even sprain himself. He'd be like, "Whoa, trippy." All Might seeing this wouldn't notice the mistake Deku was doing by only using one part of his body at once. Anyway, after a couple weeks of training One For All with All Might on the low, they don't train too regularly because Deku's already kind of strong. Well, Deku would also have Bakugo putting on the loop, showing Bakugo his new strength. Bakugo being like, "I'll just train twice as hard to catch up to you," Bakugo before this was kind of stronger than Deku, but now they're more even, with Deku in the higher tier. And because of One For All, he can lightly outmatch Bakugo. Anyway, Deku would go to UA on the first day, being excited. He had a new power to show off. He had a new power to show off, and it was his first day of hero school. He'd go to class seeing Ida arguing with Bakugo, being like, "Huh? Bakugo, how are you already making friends on the first day?" He'd be teasing Bakugo. As Bakugo would be like, "Shut up, this boy freak isn't my friend." He'd be looking at Ida, he'd be like, "Buzz off, Fluoride, you gotta stick up your ass." Ida would be like, "Why I never? I am simply asking you to get off these feet, to get your feet off these desks used by your esteemed upperclassmen and alumni of UA. Shut up." Bakugo would say. Deku would be laughing, watching Bakugo and Ida rile each other up as he see Uraraka walk through the door. Uraraka would be like, "It's you, Blondie. You're the golden one who stopped me from getting hurt at the entrance exam." Deku would be like, "Huh?" Deku would be like, "Huh? Who are you?" Uraraka would reintroduce herself, saying her name is Ochako Uraraka, and how she was the one Deku saved at the entrance exam, showing off like the scar on her ankle. Deku would be like, "Oh, it's you." Deku would be like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about it that much. I didn't even think about it that much. As Deku would be interacting with Uraraka and all the people coming through the door, Aizawa would rise from the front of the class in his little caterpillar sleeping bag. "If you're all here to make friends, I suggest you shut up. I suggest you leave right now." Deku would see Aizawa and be like, he's scary. Faintly remembering Nejire telling him about someone like this, being like, I can't put my finger on it. Aizawa would throw Deku. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention this, but Deku did get first place during the entrance exam. It doesn't really matter what he got, he just got higher than Bakugo. Let's just say he got like 125 and Bakugo got 107. Yeah. Bakugo got a little bit of hero points, but Deku got a lot of hero points, you know? Like, Deku kind of got carried by hero points. But anyway, after Deku would get dressed in the changing room, him, Kirishima, and Bakugo exchanging workout tips and such, he'd get to the PE lot, where Aizawa would throw Deku the ball. "Throw this with everything you got." And Deku would be like, "Everything I got?" Aizawa would be like, "Yes, everything you got." Okay, Deku would put 15% one fall into his hand, golden lightning cracking around his arm as he also swirl energy around his palm. He'd throw the ball, getting, I want to say 3 kilometers. You know, the ball definitely moves hella fast. Deku would throw the ball with his quirk, getting 3 kilometers. As Aizawa would be like, "That's a bad standard to set. That's good expectations. I want all of you to go beyond, plus ultra." The class would be like, "Ooh, this is exciting. This looks fun." Aizawa would be like, "Fun? I have 3 years to mold you into perfect heroes. There's no time for fun," he'd say. "In fact, let's up the stakes. Anyone who I deem inadequate from this test gets expelled," Aizawa would say, activating his quirk, his head sticking on end just for intimidation. As the clock would be like, "Okay, understood." Now, Deku's kind of cracked. He has 15% one full roll, and 15% one full at energy blast. So I can say he can get at least second on everything, you know. Like, I don't think he can get higher than the Octo-One kid than Shoji in the grip strength, or higher than Mineta in the side to side jump, but he can do really good in things like the distance sprinting because of his sliding technique, the long jump because of his flying, and 15% one fall. You know, he can, because he can't constantly keep one fall in. If he touches, if he put 15% one fall, then took a step, he'd do a really big jump. But if he, no, I don't need to explain this too hard, but still, Deku kind of just, let's get at least second place in every event. He got second to third place in the ball throw. Maybe Momo got higher than him with a cannon, and Uraraka definitely got higher than him. Bakugo getting about 2 kilometers, you know. Bakugo is way stronger than he is in cannon. And having mimicked Deku's energy blast from his feet to get explosions from his feet as well. Being able to fight like Shinra now in Fire Force. And being able to make balls of explosions as well. Because I feel like that's something Bakugo should have been able to do in canon. But anyway, Deku and Bakugo get first and second place respectively. Momo getting third, Todoroki getting fourth, and yeah, the rest of the places don't matter. Anyway, after class, people would be swarming Deku, trying to figure out what his quirk was. Deku would explain his quirk, saying that he has energy that he can flow throughout his body. When he flows it out, it comes out with a swirl. But he'd lie, saying that he can flow it inwards to increase his strength. Right? That's the cover story for One For All. Also, I am removing the thing that One For All hurts people. That One For All hurts quirk people. That is, I do think that was a Deus Ex Machina by Horikoshi to further justify Deku getting One For All even though he was quirkless. I don't hate it, but it is a bit of Deus Ex Machina. Like a plot device. Anyway, after class, they'd all go to orientation. Aizawa expelling no one, just saying it was a deception to get everyone to try harder. The class being salty about this, but going to orientation afterwards. Deku and Bakugo would sit for orientation, being like, "Oh, this is so boring." They'd want to go fight. After orientation, though, they'd get their wishes answered, as All Might would come through the door like a normal person, saying it was time for the class to do their first Hero Training 101, getting everyone in their costumes. Now, for real, I don't know what Deku's costume is going to look like. I'm just going to save the costume in the thumbnail. That Vigilante Deku outfit, that Dark Hero or Vigilante Deku outfit, whatever you want to call it, I think it would look cold. But, I don't think that suits his personality. Let's just go with that. The costume, damn, making Deku looks mad clean, as All Might would be like, seeing the slight inspirations from him. But anyway, the matchup. Actually, should I make the matchup the same as in canon? I don't think I want the matchup to be the same as in canon. I'm gonna say it's Deku and Mineta versus Mina. Deku and Mineta versus Mina and Kirishima. Yeah. Kirishima would take a Bakugo. Actually, nah, since Kirishima is more of a hold down the fort guy, I'd say Mina would take a Bakugo role like in canon, as Deku would have Mineta go upwards to fight Kirishima. Now, I low-key think Mineta might be a hard counter to a lot of characters. I don't think Popoff is bottom 10 weakest quirks in the verse, high-key. But anyway, Deku would be going through the hallways, trying to go up to the top floor to fight Kirishima, but he'd get ambushed by Mina, who'd start throwing acid at him. Deku would weave the first thing across with acid, seeing it melt for a rock next to him. Mina would be like, "I should lower the viscosity." As Deku would be like, "You think?" Trying to shoot swirly energy blocks at her, but Mina would dodge. Mina would make a large ball of acid and lay it on the floor in front of Deku, as Deku would start running towards her, making Deku fall to the floor below from the cumbering ground. Mina would laugh at him like a raccoon, like Deku from the bottom floor seeing Mina through the hole in the floor would jump up using 15% One For All in his feet. He's jumping through and hitting her with an uppercut in the chin. No One For All in his fist though, right? Just like a calm little uppercut. Mina being like, having bitten her tongue from the uppercut, being like, feeling. She'd low-key be feeling it, and that could be like, "Oop, sorry." Anyway, he'd go in for another punch, being like, "Destroy, smash." Mina would weave the flowing air and energy going towards her, being like, "Whoa." Seeing the energy pushing a bunch of air towards her, he'd dodge. He tried to dodge, but due to the narrow hallway and the energy and the air being widespread, Mina would get hit, slamming into a wall, indenting into it, making a small snow angel of debris. Mina would melt herself out of the wall before sliding towards Deku. She'd circle him with her little roller skate feet, with her little thing, ash, the shadow that took air shoes type things Mina has. That looks like a weird support item, but I used to stop going with tangents. Anyway, Mina would circle him before hitting Deku with an uppercut, being like, "How you like that, huh?" Before she'd stop before he start hitting Deku with combos. Deku, I'd say like Mina would be using like capoeira, if you know what that is. It's a Brazilian martial art mostly based around dancing, but still, Mina would be hitting Deku with moves like that, kicking him a bunch from different angles, using acid kick that Deku would be dodging, countering back with his own boxing style techniques, throwing quick jabs, ducking underneath, going for uppercuts. They'd be going at it. Pause. Deku about to hit Mino or a punch to her face before he's barely stopped by All Might going, "Hero Team wins!" Now we flash back to Mineta going up to fight Kirishima. Now, Mineta would mostly be stalling for time against Kirishima. Kirishima would be throwing haymakers at Mineta, who would low-key be getting slugged around the room, being able to survive because of gag character durability. Mineta would get a punch with a stony haymaker. If you play Marvel Rivals, but still he get hit with a stony haymaker to the chest as he be like spitting out a bit before he be like, that hurt, with a little lisp. Mineta would throw a sticky ball at Kirishima next time he tried to punch him as he dodge out the way, using like a substitution jutsu with sticky balls. Since Mineta's low-key mad for us, he do like a substitution jutsu with sticky balls, making Kirishima punch a dummy of him that his fist would stick to, as Kirishima would be like, unable to get his fist out as Mineta would go and tap the ball, being like blah to Kirishima, making fun of him, being like and getting that pink girl afterwards. Mineta would say, hey, as making Kirishima blush, as All Might would be like, "Hero Team wins!" Now during the match breakdown, Deku and Mina would get scolded for fighting so much. Not scolded, but like reprimanded, because all they did was fight while their teammates actually did stuff with a bomb. Like Deku I think it's fine since they were kind of holding each other off for their teammates, but still, Mineta would be given MVP for the fact that he was able to fight against someone stronger than him, Kirishima. And still win. You don't need to be stronger than someone to win. Versus Battle Community, don't at me. But still. Anyway. After this, the class would go through a couple normal weeks of boring school. Deku and Bakugo being bored out their mind. Deku being like, In this time, they will be training on the low. Deku getting himself to about, I'm gonna say 20-ish% month rule. 20-ish% month rule. But like still 15. But he'll use 15% normally, but 20-ish% if he wants to strain himself. So yeah. He still hasn't figured out full cowling though, due to the fact that Deku's only been using his energy in his hands and feet. But that's going to be changing with the USJ event. Now, Deku and his class will be in their hero costumes in the bus to USJ. Deku will be having an animated conversation with some randoms in the back of the class, going on about like favorite foods, favorite pro heroes, quirks where they went middle school, favorite school subject. Like Deku's a chatterbox in this time, so he just wants to chat about anything, right? Deku just wants to chat about anything. While the class would be going to a USJ. At the USJ, Deku would get a small pang of anxiety, being like, what's going on, Oh, he felt a very bad feeling as they entered the USJ, not paying attention to 13 If you can't tell, he's slightly unlocking a new power, the ability to sense energy from other people. Before he'd be like, 13 would be like, young Midori, can you please be quiet for a minute, Miss 13? I feel something off. He'd point to a central plaza as Korogiri would start making his portal. Also being like, heroes. Deku and Bakugo would cut Korogiri off in the speech, each flying down to go fight him. Like, villains, they'd say. Hey, Bakugo knowing to trust Deku's bad feelings since they're friends in this timeline. Deku is flying, going with a 15% 1-4 punch while also swirling energy around his arm. Trying to hit Kurogiri before both their shots would whiff. They'd go through into an abandoned building where Deku and Bakugo's punches would land on the building, blowing the wall out. They'd look around themselves, seeing they were surrounded by villains. Deku would be like, person who defeats the most villains get $15. Bakugo would be like, bet. They'd fly around the room, defeating villains. They'd fly around the room defeating villains, They'd both get 15 villains each before they'd start arguing about it in the middle of the room, being like, I defeated more villains than you. Deku would say, no you didn't, Bakugo would say, as he'd grab the invisible villain like in canon, being like, now I defeated more villains than you. Deku would be like, Fooey, he'd say, with a little pout. As him and Bakugo would climb out the building. Maybe that was a bit too quick actually. But still, Deku and Bakugo would climb out the building they were in, fly into the central plaza, seeing Aizawa deal with all the photos, being like, good shit, Aizawa, good shit. As Deku would be clapping, pretending to cry, being like, beautiful hands, as Aizawa would be piecing up all the further villains. Deku and Bakugo would be about to go in to help before they'd feel fear, seeing Shigaraki being like, Nomu, kill the pro. But Nomu would flash step towards Aizawa before stomping his head into the pavement. It would crouch down, slamming Aizawa's head into the pavement again. Deku and Bakugo would go in, about to hit the Nomu from two separate angles before Shigaraki would descend and kill the brats too. Before Shigaraki would command, kill the brats too. The Nomu would slap them both out the sky, slapping Bakugo across the water zone into the shipwreck. Deku, seeing Bakugo get slapped into the shipwreck, would yell, going towards the Nomu, trying to absorbing energy from it before he'd feel sick. Like feeling the Nomu didn't have the same energy as the normal people he's absorbed energy from, being like about to vomit before the Nomu would slap Deku again and slamming his head into the pavement like he did with Aizawa. Deku would shoot energy from his feet to get himself out of the Nomu's grip before going in for a 15% bump full smash, which the Nomu would eat like a four-piece McNugget combo. Deku would be getting his head gripped by the Nomu, as he'd start slamming 15% 1-4 punches into the Nomu's head, his fist hitting like pillows before the Nomu would slam Deku into the pavement again. And Deku getting the wind blown out of him, he'd spit up blood, being like doing that anime thing. Deku would get up again, still his resolve unwavering as he'd fight the Nomu, 1-4's energy crackling around him. Deku in this moment would do something instinctively. He'd gather energy throughout his full body while also gathering in a 20% full cowling. He'd use a full body blast, going straight through the Nomu's chest before the Nomu would regenerate. Deku would be like, whoa. Feeling the energy circulate throughout his whole body, being like, sis can't do this. He'd smile, being like, okay, new move, Turbo Star. He'd start using full body blast to get himself around the Nomu, kind of like what Bakugo was doing in season 6. Kind of like what Bakugo was doing in season 7 of MHA. Deku would be using full body blast to get around the Nomu before hitting energy infused plus 1-4 punches. Star Cannon. Deku, despite his new power up, would not be doing much damage to Nomu, but the burn marks from Deku's energy would stop. But Deku would start leaving burn marks from his energy. Still, the Nomu is still way stronger than Deku. He'd hit Deku with another punch before Deku would do something else new. He'd absorb the kinetic energy from the Nomu's punch. Now, before this, Deku would absorb energy like Bakugo's explosion, stuff like Todoroki's fire, that kind of thing. But now Deku's absorbing kinetic energy from the Nomu's punch. Deku let himself get whaled by the Nomu absorbing the energy. Deku can still feel the pain of this, but he's getting stronger from it. He'd be smiling from this. Yes, yes, yes. A small nub would start growing on Deku's head as he extended to another fully grown horn. Deku having 2 horns in this moment, looking like a demon, absorbing so much energy that energy would sprout from his back like wings. It would sprout from his back like wings, golden energy sprouting like a butterfly. Now before it would stop, and Deku would absorb even more and more energy. It would turn black. Deku going, shooting Nova. He'd make a shooting star blast like normal, but it would be pure pitch black. Shoot a hole through the normal that wouldn't heal. He'd go in Nova cannon. He'd punch the normal like earlier, hitting a normal punch like a Detroit smash before a secondary wave of energy would go through the normal's head, blasting his head clean off. Deku would laugh after this before he'd stop bleeding. You know, that anime thing where their body randomly starts like jerking violently and going in, and like small shoots of blood would be going for it. He absorbed too much energy. He had to figure out one way to get rid of it. He'd be like, bah! Doing what he did to a 0.8 cannon, releasing energy going directly above him, straight shredding Inomu's entire body. Shigaraki in this incident would be like, Kurogiri, help me! As Kurogiri in the last moment before Shigaraki would get destroyed, would take Shigaraki out, sending him back to the hideout like in canon. You know, Shigaraki in this, I'm gonna say Shigaraki maybe like loses a couple fingers from this, being like, I'll get that kid next time I see him. You know, uses like part of his pinky finger on his left hand. You know, he still uses quirk on his left hand. You know, but still, Shigaraki would be tweaking inside that base, being like, I'll get that kid. Deku in the USJ would be in excruciating pain, releasing all his energy. You know, his second horn shrinking back into himself as he'd go back to having one horn and falling over. Aizawa cancelling Deku's quirk as to stop him from hurting himself. As the UA teachers would come around, either coming too late this time, but still, the UA teachers would deal with the rest of the fodder. All might damn near soloing all the fodder villains. Out of pure anger. After seeing his successor injured. Deku after this would go to Recovery Girl's office, where he'd get treated from his own energy burns on his body, and he'd also get treated on the exit points of his back, where the energy expelled to make his wings, which Deku will be revisiting, by the way, the wings technique. You know, that was such a cool idea in my head. Oh yeah, just for you guys who aren't getting it, by the way, Deku's powers are based on Dark Star from Ben 10. And if you didn't get that, Deku basically had 2 power-ups. He grew a second horn temporarily, meaning he exceeded his normal level of energy absorption, and he exceeded his normal level of energy absorption, meaning he was at like 120% output for his energy, and he unlocked full body blast and full cowling. You know, Deku had only been using one full in one part because he was only using his energy in one part, but now he's using one full and his energy in both parts, in all parts of his body at the same time, basically, right? Deku can use one full in all parts of his body while using energy in one part of his body, essentially, right? But still, Deku after healing there would be a 3-day break from school, you know, where Deku would be bandaged up, Nejire taking care of him, being like, ooh, what happened to the USJ? What happened? Deku explaining to her what happened. They'd be on the same wavelength, you know. They'd both be speaking nonsense to an outsider. It sounds like they're speaking nonsense, right? Because they're speaking super fast. But Deku and Nejire understand each other perfectly, you know, because they're siblings. Anyway, after the 3-day break, Deku would go back to UA, as Aizawa would tell them to train for the UA entrance exam. Now, not entrance exam, sports exam. Now, Deku would exit class after being told about the sports festival, where he'd see all the general studies and class 1B people, you know, all the general studies, class 1B, support course, all them types of people, right? Bahu would be like, you guys, you lose the scope, you're not the competition. Good. Take a good look at us. We're going to be the next top heroes UA's ever. We're going to be the best heroes UA's ever seen. Now, out of my way, you damn extras. Bakugo will pick a target on everyone in UA in 1A's back. Now, on the day of the sports festival, Deku would do the speech. It doesn't matter what he says for the speech. Let's just say he rambles, gets everyone excited, being like everyone in the crowd thinking Deku's like endearing or cute or some shit, Everyone in the crowd thinking Deku's endearing. Now, I can't lie, for the race, Deku's got this on lock. He's a speed demon. The moment it would start, Deku would use a body flicker type technique, mixing 20% full cowling, with a full body energy blast, moving smooth, blasting straight through the ice. Todoroki would bursting straight through the ice wall. Todoroki would try to erect, pause, leaving a Deku shaped hole in it. Turbo Star! Deku would be flying through it, Deku would be flying through it with Turbo Star technique, which is like his full body, like mobility energy blast type thing. Deku would be flying around, going quickly. He'd blast through the robots, running straight through them. Wait, I need to pause recording for a second. Deku would straight fly over that pit with ease, jumping over it in one big leap. And when he gets to the minefield is easy. So Deku can now absorb energy from every part of his body. I forgot to mention that. Deku can absorb energy from all parts of his body. So when he starts over the minefield, he absorbs the energy from the explosions, essentially making it so he can absorb the kinetic energy from the concussive force of the explosions, and the actual combustive energy from the explosions as well, right? So Deku can basically walk through the minefield unharmed. It's basically like a leisurely stroll for him. And Deku would get to the finish line at first place. Now, I'm gonna be real. I'm skipping over the cavalry battle because it's lame. And Deku would go straight through a 1v1, so he's 1v1ing Shinso. Now, Shinso will be talking hella shit on Deku, right? But Deku doesn't really respond because he's mad. He responds because he's an idiot, being like, well, that's just untrue, isn't it? That's unkind. Right? Shinso would be like, go this pretty boy. Right? Shinso would be like, now do me a favor, pretty boy, and walk off the stage. Deku would be about to walk off the stage. Boy, he'd have a similar moment to in Canon. Except it wasn't just one fall flowing through his body breaking him out. Except it wasn't just one fall flowing through his body breaking it out. Deku would also spew energy from the same finger the same finger that twitched, sending out that wave of air. The wave of energy and air throwing Shinso out of bounds. Now, Deku's next fight with Todoroki is Deku's next fight is Todoroki. Now, Todoroki starts off the fight the same way he does in Todoroki and Deku starts the fight the same way we do in canon. Deku would shoot a blast of air from his fingers, mixed a blast of air and energy from his fingers, as Todoroki would shoot a large geyser of ice. Now, Deku is moving at 20% 1-4, but plus his energy, he's mimicking like 30 to 50% most of the time, Like, it's kind of like the full 100% thing he does in canon. Now, Deku after this first blast of ice would know he hasn't got much left in the tank, He needs to coax Todoroki into using his fire so he can absorb it. Meaning he can't put off the pressure. Deku after this first blast use a full body Turbo Star to get into Todoroki's face, about to hit him with a punch, but Todoroki would block it over a wall of ice, getting Deku's fist stuck in the ice, Deku would shoot a secondary punch at Todoroki's chest, blasting through the ice and slugging Todoroki in the chest. But since Deku had to punch through the ice first, Todoroki had a lessened impact to his chest. Todoroki smiled at this, throwing an icy punch at Deku. Deku that frees part of Deku's face. But Deku would melt it off with a blast of golden energy. Deku would be like, shit. I can't absorb his eyes. He'd be going in, about to slam Todoroki in the face again. And before Todoroki would make would make a wall of ice to block Deku's punch again. Deku straight running into it, hitting it head first. Todoroki would kick Deku in the head. Todoroki would kick Deku in the head. Todoroki knew Deku needed him to use his fire. Todoroki knew Deku needed him to use his fire to refill his tank, but he didn't know how much Deku had in the tank left. They both had an advantage. Deku had more output than Todoroki, but Todoroki had the advantage knowing that Deku was low on energy, and knowing that he had to just play the waiting game. But Todoroki didn't know how little Deku had in the tank. Deku had way more than Todoroki thought. Deku would go in with another punch. Deku would go in and start hammering blows on Todoroki. Todoroki's ice barriers breaking the moment they appeared. Deku would not put off the pressure. He either had to get Todoroki out or absorb fire to keep him in the game. Todoroki wouldn't know how to react. Wouldn't know how to react. He'd send off a wave of fire. Deku would flinch back for a second. The fire hitting him, slightly burning him before he'd absorb it into himself. Todoroki would be looking disgusted at himself before Deku would start hammering in the pressure again. Todoroki not even moving, just taking the beating before he'd remember his mother's words. Having a similar moment to in Canon, but this time without as much of Deku's input. He'd start rupturing fire and ice from himself, making Deku back up from the heat. Making Deku back up from the heat and cold, being like, Todoroki now would start moving similar to Canon, making all those ice walls in front of him before he started making a large blast of fire. Deku would be in a similar situation, gathering all the energy in his hand before he'd shoot it out as a large beam. Star Wave! Flash Freeze Heat Wave! Deku and Todoroki's blast would meet in the middle before Todoroki would hit the side of the arena first, Deku hitting it a split second after him. Deku would have won the match. Now, Ida is gonna drop out the next match due to his brother. I know he doesn't do that in canon, but I don't really want to go off Deku versus Ida because Ida's a bum. Anyway, actually I don't even hate Ida that much. I just don't want to go over that next match. Anyway, the final match is way more exciting. Deku versus Bakugo. Now this is the match Deku and Bakugo have been waiting for ages. The moment they go in, it's straight combos. Bakugo throws explosive punches. Deku and Bakugo had agreed that Deku had chosen not to use 1-4 for this match, wanting to face Bakugo like he did when he was a kid. But he still uses full body blast, you know. Deku and Bakugo in straight combos. Bakugo throwing explosive punches as Deku would throw energy imbued punches, you know. Deku would put energy in his arm, punch Bakugo, a secondary impact and energy would hit him. Bakugo would punch Deku before hitting an explosion, a secondary explosion hitting him, you know. They'd have similar fighting styles, matching each other. Boxing, Muay Thai, Capoeira, different martial arts they learned together growing up. Deku being like, that doesn't work on me, I taught you that. Bakugo would be like, what I didn't teach you this. He throw an explosion in Deku's face, temporarily blinding him before he'd use a mimicry of Deku's technique, a full body blast, get behind Deku. Deku being like, explosive speed, turbo. His explosive speed turbo being different as it was in canon. Due to his Bakugo's further training, he'd have unlocked a version of his quirk awakening. He's not as strong as he is in season 7, but he can still use full body blast due to being able to compress his explosive sweat throughout his entire body instead of just his palms and feet. Explosive speed, turbo. Deku would be like, when did you learn that? Bakugo would be like, the same time you did. He'd hit Deku with a double palm strike. Or an explosive double palm strike to Deku's back. Aiming for spots in Deku's back where he was injured. Deku would be like, boom, cheap blow, he'd say. Okay, smiling manically. He'd get up into the air before crashing down on Bakugo. Cross arm dive. Actually, wait, no, that's not cool. Shoot, before crashing down on Todoroki. Comet Crater! He'd cross his arms, kind of like Nam in Dragon Ball, covering them with energy. Bakugo would barely dodge out the way. As Deku would leave an X shape across the entire arena, fully splitting it up, making debris go flying everywhere. Bakugo would start using this debris to his advantage, doing a similar thing to what he did in his match against Uraraka, except this time instead of fully destroying it, he weakens the power of the explosions to make a mist of explosive dust, causing Deku to start coughing. Now Bakugo would ignore the pain in his lungs as he'd fly towards Deku. Trying to hit him with another explosive palm slam. But Deku would be like, if you used it, I haven't forgotten it. He'd hit Bakugo with a similar palm strike. Or a similar palm strike technique. A mix of explosions and the energy. The collision from their attacks making a slight explosion that shoot them both back. They'd both catch themselves before they'd fall out the arena. Deku going in for a punch against Bakugo. They'd start wailing on each other. Explosive punches, energy punches, boom, 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 boom. They start hitting each other, both getting lower and lower in energy before Deku would go in for an uppercut against Bakugo, who'd weave out the way, being like, don't think I forgot about your finishing uppercut. He'd smile, blood trickling down his head as he'd go in, slapping Deku, palming Deku's face, hitting an explosion on it, hitting a full power explosion on it, being like, get out. Deku in the last moment would absorb the energy from the explosion, being on his knee. Would absorb the energy from the explosion through his face, being on his knees, glowing like that baby in episode 1, being like, lost Trump, heavy star cannon. He threw a blast in his mouth. His final trump card, sending Bakugo straight out of the arena. Bakugo not expecting this would get blown out of bounds. Now, since Bakugo lost fair and square, he's not as mad as he is in canon, and he says next time he'll beat Deku, you know? He's not that much weaker than Deku, I need that to be clear. They just both really tired each other out. And Tokoyami wins third place because I like Tokoyami. And All Might give Deku his first place ring, trophy, ribbon, medal, no chip, a first place chip as well, a belt. Like Deku gets all that anyway, funding money. After the sports festival, when they come back, everyone has a bunch of papers at their desk. Deku having the most. Now, there are a bunch of reasons why heroes would want Deku, mainly being his strong quirk, but another reason, like a subtle one, Deku's sense of honor, because he honors Bakugo by not using his extra power, but like without. Actually, wait, no, the heroes don't know about that. Scratch that. But still, I want that to be highlighted. Deku kind of honored Bakugo by not using one for all, using only the power he had from birth, just like Bakugo was. You know, the power they've both been cultivating since they were little kids. Anyway, since Deku already has full howling, he doesn't need to go with Gran Torino. So Deku goes with, I'm gonna say Mirko, because Mirko's my favorite pro hero. No, I'm not that down bad. Mirko's just the best pro hero in the show, objectively. Like he's fine, but he's the best pro hero. Anyway, Deku would arrive at Mirko's agency, which I'm gonna say is in the middle of nowhere, like in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. Deku would be like, huh? He'd be like, is this the right place? Seeing Mirko's agency, he'd open the door, seeing how messy it was. Mirko would be sitting on the couch smoking. We'd be sitting on the couch smoking, be like, we'd be sitting on the couch smoking. No. It would be like, huh? Mirko would be sitting on the couch smoking, be like, huh? Are you the intern? Deku would look around, and there was a punching bag, a bunch of scattered paperwork, no interns, no sidekicks, no nothing. Mirko's kind of a one-man show. If you know, you know. Like, that's a canon thing, by the way. Mirko doesn't even have an agency in canon. She fights by herself. Anyway, Deku during his time with Mirko would work on his connect energy absorption, you know, the ability to absorb energy from hits, damn near making Deku invincible in this time. And you know, Deku would become Deku will become title card. Due to his ability to absorb kinetic energy, he can absorb the impact behind blows. So he can absorb the impact behind blows. He can still get hurt. His body is still getting injured, but Deku doesn't feel it, essentially. I don't know if that's how that would work in real life, but I can't have Deku be so overpowered that he can't feel pain. So anyway, Deku will be coming back from his internship early due to either getting marked by Stain. Sorry, Deku wasn't there to save him this time because he wasn't with Gran Torino, and I really don't really care about the Stain fight this time. I didn't want to do it since I have trouble with that fight the most. Anyway, due to either dying, UA doesn't make class 1A and B go through the final exams, and they go straight to training camp. Now, in the training camp, Deku would be practicing something specific, suppressing his energy. You know how they do in Free Win, where by suppressing the energy, they progressively get stronger. Because they're using less and less energy to achieve the things they do, or more to achieve the things they do with their normal amount of energy. Yeah, Deku's doing that essentially, right? Deku doing that essentially, right? Which would be low-key ripping his body apart, but Deku would be adapting to it, to have recovery girl on standby. Deku would suppress more and more energy. His body would start ripping itself apart because of his absorption limit. He'd get a kiss from recovery girl. He'd have a high absorption limit, that kind of thing, They'd be doing it repetitively, repeatedly every day until the night of the Vanguard Action Squad attack. Now, Deku has a similar relationship to Koda as in canon. Koda still punched Deku in the dick. Uncalled for, by the way. That's so a wild off scene. Anyway, Deku would be sensing Koda's energy. Seeing that he was with another person. Sensing Koda was with Muscular. And he'd feel the bad intentions coming from Muscular. Deku would arrive just in time, about when Koda was about to get palmed by Muscular. Deku would catch Muscular's palm with his hand, kind of high-five Muscular as he'd look down at Koda. It's fine, kid, you're safe. He quickly flashed that down, using a full body turbo star to get Koda down. He'd flash back up to fight Muscular, being like, I can't leave you down, can't I? Muscular would be like, one question, kid. Do you know a Midoriya? Deku would be like, do you know a Hado? Deku would be like, Muscular would be like, judging by reaction, I'm guessing that's you. Muscular would smile, seeing Deku low-key squirming. Deku's exhausted from his training. He did get a recovery girl kiss, but still, he hasn't reabsorbed enough energy. So he's kind of going to fight Muscular while on empty. He's not on empty, but that gaslight is on, if you know what I'm saying. Now, Deku for the first part of the fight would be throwing heavies at Muscular. Muscular staggering from each punch. Deku's punches having as much weight in them as, I'm gonna say Deku is hitting as far as 45% Deku was in canon. Straight cooking the one that was cooking freshly jailbroken Muscular, Deku would start walloping Muscular, hitting him with straight combos. Before he'd go in for another punch, or he'd be like, before all the energy in his punch would fizzle out. He was out of energy. He'd start trying to use one forward, but Muscular would catch his 20% punch, being like, you don't have as much in the tank as you thought. Deku would take a punch from Muscular but Muscular would notice something. Deku started smiling. All the energy in Muscular's punch was enough to fill Deku's horn plus some. Deku would have a small nerve start forming in the other side of his head, being like, thanks for the extra juice. Muscular would keep slamming into Deku, hitting him with harder and harder punches, causing Deku's head to stop bleeding. But Deku would be like, thanks. He'd cock his arm back. To hit Muscular. Star Cannon. Deku, the power of his second horn, would start emitting black energy like he did in the USJ. Would start emitting black energy like he did in the USJ. Would emit black energy like he did in the USJ, straight punching a hole in Muscular's shoulder, causing his arm to fall off as Muscular would pass out. Now, after this, Deku starts sensing all the energy around him. Deku starts sensing all the energy around him, seeing that Bakugo and Todoroki were in trouble, fighting someone who had a manic and ever-changing energy. He'd go down seeing Bakugo and Todoroki were fighting against Moonfish. Deku would appear and punch Moonfish in the mouth, breaking all his teeth immediately. Bakugo and Todoroki being like, "Thank you." Deku would be like, "No problem," he'd say, smiling. And then before Bakugo would suddenly disappear, being snatched up by Mr. Compress. Now, Deku would be about to reach Mr. Compress before Magna would appear. Using her magnet on the North Pole while making Deku using her magnet on the blue one while making Deku also a blue one. I can't remember which one's which one magnets, but still, she'd repel Deku away as Kurogiri would appear. Yeah, Mr. Compressor would smile while snatching Bakugo through the portal. As it would close. The League of Villains narrowly escaping as Deku would start screaming. Now, Deku would release a bunch of energy, passing out. Deku would release a bunch of energy into the sky, passing out, felling over trees near him as he'd wake up in the hospital. Now, I'm gonna say Deku woke up after the whole Kamino incident. I think either Kirishima, I'm gonna say they took Uraraka with them this time. Either Kirishima or Uraraka Momo, having been able to save Bakugo like they did in canon, All Might still retiring, but All For One would still be locked up. But in this time, right, I'm gonna say All Might beat All For One way worse than he did in canon, almost killing him. So All For One, as a last effort before he would die, would give Shigaraki All For One, like the quirk, give Shigaraki All For One, trusting Shigaraki as his successor, trusting that Shigaraki would be the greatest demon lord before All For One and have his face had his head punched clean into ketchup or sriracha, whatever you want to call it. Ketchup, tomatoes, or sriracha. Not the same thing, but still. Sriracha and ketchup aren't the same thing, but still. Anyway, Deku would wake up after the Kamino incident, seeing all this on the news. All Might's weak form would be revealed to everyone, but the public would be praising him for seemingly killing the greatest villain they've ever seen. One with multiple quirks. All Might would now be in retirement, being a full-time teacher at UA, and they'd get into the dorms. They'd have the same dorm explorer thing as in canon, and they'd do the provisional hero license exam. And I'm gonna say Deku just passes. I don't really care about the license exam, Deku and Bakugo don't have that fight afterwards like in canon, so they can both go to the same place for the work studies. I'm not gonna say Deku goes with Night Eye. I'm going to say Deku goes back to Mako for his work study, taking Bakugo with him this time. And in this time thing, basically, Mako throws them in like a forest with quirked out animals, and they have to survive, that kind of thing. Like Mako puts them both through the ringer, giving them worse than they did before they had, giving them a worse treatment than before they had their license. Deku's still training by suppressing his energy. It's kind of like Rock Lee's weights at this point, The more he trains with suppressing his energy, the stronger he gets. Deku, while he was in his work study with Mako, whenever he'd go back to school, he'd hear rumors about a raid going on at a Yakuza place. By the time his work study was done, he'd hear about a third year having beaten a super strong villain, Overhaul. A villain like Overhaul. Anyway, after this is the war arc. Now, the heroes would still, Deku would be on the hospital raid team, unlike in canon. Deku would be ready, going in to raid the hospital, walking in with Mako and Bakugo. They'd find the doctor, in Endeavor and Aizawa slapping the shit out of him, slapping the shit out of the doctor before he'd lead Mako, Deku, and Bakugo. Before he lead Mako and Deku. Bakugo's still in the same place as he was in canon, in the back when people from the city. Quick little retcon, but still he'd lead Mako and Deku into He'd lead Mako and Deku into the basement where all the high ends are being kept. He'd start leading them on, having Mako fight the same high ends as in Cannon, hanging a strong, one really, really strong high end and keeping Deku back. One really, really strong high end keeping Deku back. Deku would watch, crying, seeing Mako run through all the other high ends, getting to Shigaraki, where after she'd kick Shigaraki's tube open and Shigaraki would get shocked by that wire, Shigaraki would decay Mako, being like, "It's cold," Shigaraki would say, killing Mako. Deku would cry, seeing Mako die. Deku would cry seeing Mako die. He'd punch the gnome who's fighting the head clean off, punching that high-end head clean off, as he'd watch Shigaraki decay another villain, decay another hero, stealing that man's cape. By the way, I was having a question about this. Is that the superhero version of getting your chain took? If you made it this far into the video, comment chain, by the way. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention this, but subscribe. It would make my day. And if you subscribe, I'll subscribe back. Anyway, Deku, after seeing Mako and Exodus both die, would go in, trying to hit Shigaraki with straight haymakers that Shigaraki would ignore, be like, "Kid, you're tiring." He'd try "Kid, you're tiring," he'd say, recognizing Deku, being like, "Oh, you're the one who did this to me." He'd show his finger, showing how it was stitched and grafted together. The one that Deku almost blew off Deku almost blew off during the USJ. Being like, "You almost took one of my fingers, you know? These are important." He tried to kill Deku, but Deku at the last minute would erect a thin layer of energy around him, protecting himself. Of continuously putting it up that way Shigaraki would only be decaying the layer of energy around him. Shigaraki being like, "Well, ain't you a smart kid?" He'd throw Deku up before volleyball spiking him out the basement. He'd fly up into the city like in Cannon. Everyone seeing Deku fighting Shigaraki. Deku fighting an almost complete body Shigaraki. Deku getting his ass whooped. Shigaraki would spike Deku down. Into the pavement before flying down, dragging Deku through the floor. While he was dragging Deku through the floor, he'd tap the ground with his other hand, decaying the city like he did. Deku would be getting dragged, about to fly in to hit Shigaraki with a punch before Shigaraki would shoot an impure beam at Deku's hand. Not breaking it, but shoot an impure beam at Deku's hand, throwing him off balance as he was about to land a punch. Shigaraki would be about to land another blow on Deku, realizing his weakness. He can't do two things with energy at the same time. He can't do a full body blast while making his skin tight barrier. He'd be about to decay Deku before Shigaraki's hand would get blown clean off by Bakugo, who threw an AP shot, cutting Shigaraki's hand off. Deku, seeing Bakugo, would smile as they both go in, jumping Shigaraki, who'd be regenerating from their hit. Deku shooting quick blast, blowing Shigaraki's hands and legs off as Bakugo would try flying through his chest with an explosive speed turbo, as Shigaraki regenerating almost instantly from all their attacks. Pro heroes going in, Endeavor bear hugging Shigaraki before hitting a prominent burn. Hawks trying to cut up Shigaraki, Baby jumping him, but Shigaraki would be regenerating from all their hits. He'd fly down. He'd disrespect Endeavor and Ryukyu. He hit Endeavor and Ryukyu, same disrespect as he does in Canon, you know, being kicking Ryukyu to the floor before standing on Endeavor, hitting Endeavor's pose, being like, "Is this the same one you did that day?" You know. But while Shigaraki was aura farming on Endeavor, Deku would fly in, stomping on him, hitting an explosive land. Deku would fly in, stomping on Shigaraki's head, trying to blow his head clean off with a blast on his feet. For Shigaraki headbutt Deku in the groin. Shigaraki would headbutt Deku in the groin, or being like, "You rascal." He'd be going in, trying to hit Deku again before he'd feel something. Deku Deku would start unsuppressing the energy he'd been suppressing since the training camp. I almost forgot about this. Deku's energy would start glowing black, both of his horns blaring. Deku would make a ball of energy between his horns as he'd shoot at Shigaraki, blowing his head and brain smooth off, killing Shigaraki. His head and brain smooth off, killing Shigaraki, leaving only his body. But Deku, before Shigaraki could regenerate again, would shoot a blast of energy at him. Star Wave! He turned Shigaraki's body to dust, leaving straight ashing him. Now, unlike the last 2 times Deku used his black energy, he wouldn't pass out immediately. He'd undone the shackles of how much energy he could absorb. Deku had reached his truest, had reached his strongest, using 100% one full, had used 100% one full in that blast as well, breaking his arm with that Star Wave. Now, after this, Deku would be quickly wheeled off to his hospital, to quickly deal with the energy burns from his body from using his black energy, his 120% like output energy type thing. He get healed from this, just by recovery girl. Due to the excess energy in his body, his healing would go extra smooth. Now, after this, Deku would go back to school, going through his last 2 years, going through his next 2 years at UA, becoming #1 hero after he's done, unlocking 100% one for all, not getting the other quirks, because I don't think Deku needs them, low-key. Bakugo being the #2 hero in this timeline, and Todoroki being #3, Mirio being #4, Nejire as #5, that kind of thing, Deku's high up. He becomes the next symbol of peace, All Might dying peacefully, knowing that he had picked a great successor, that kind of thing. Now that's where I'm going to be ending it, people. If you watch all the way through, you should probably go breathe some fresh air. Unless you're in the UK, because I think it's raining in 30 minutes in the UK. So unless you're in the UK, you should probably go breathe some fresh air after this. Thank you for watching. That was What If Deku Had an Energy Quirk.